And joining us now, political correspondent at the New York Times, Michael C. Bender, and president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, legal analyst Maya Wiley joins us again. Great to see you, Maya.
Michael, you've written some fascinating articles recently. Your headlines have been fascinating themselves. Magical thinking and a perp walk fixation. Talk about not the year of magical thinking, but at least a week or two of magical thinking where Donald Trump at times seems oblivious to the legal gauntlet that he's going to have to be walking through over the next 6 months.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Donald Trump, as you know, Joe, is someone who has had a certain fear of being arrested for most of his life, and that has always been in the back of his mind. He's created relationships along the way in his business career and now in his political career to help him walk that line of legality. Down in Mar-a-Lago, he does not want to get arrested. Let me be clear. He does not want to be indicted, but he's trying to figure out a way to manage the political fallout to his advantage. And he's created this pressure campaign, right, to going after the Manhattan DA, calling his Democratic opponents animals and thugs, making crude jokes about Ron DeSantis along the way. And Trump and his team have, to a degree, convinced themselves that this pressure campaign is having an effect on Alvin Bragg in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, that he may not bring charges against the former president because of this pressure campaign. We heard similar things back when he was in the White House, about to be impeached by Nancy Pelosi's House, Democratic House. That Trump White House had convinced themselves that they had turned enough Democrats to defeat that vote. That was obviously a miscalculation. It probably is here again. But it goes to show that he's more focused on the political aspects of this. In fact, he's anticipating what we know as a perp walk in the business. That moment when law enforcement brings a newly arrested past a crew of journalists and news cameras. Trump is imagining this. Should I smile in front of the camera? How will this resonate with the American public? And to be clear, we don't think that there will be a perp walk. That's not up to Donald Trump. That's up to Secret Service and law enforcement that probably wants to avoid a media circus. But it gives you a sense of where his state of mind is right now down in Mar-a-Lago.
Well, I mean, what he's interested in is obviously whatever gets him the most money, raises him the most money. As we found out, the lie on Sunday was all about raising $1.5 million. Maya, I'd love to get your insight on this ongoing debate. And we heard it from cable news outlets over the weekend, fretting, and cable news hosts and some Democrats fretting, saying, oh, we can't do this. It's not a big enough case to arrest Donald Trump. You know, I just wonder what message we send. If an alleged billionaire who's ex-president of the United States doesn't get indicted for a crime in New York State for $130,000 hush money payoff to a porn star right before a presidential election, and yet New Yorkers get arrested and charged under the same crime for a $1,900 couch and stating its value wrong on an insurance form, or returning items to Lord & Taylor that you didn't really buy there and getting store credit and getting arrested for that, or a teacher using a fake COVID-19 vaccine card to try to get a day off from school. I'm just wondering, how can there be equal justice under the law when these New Yorkers get charged under this crime, and yet Republicans, some I'll just say bedwetting liberals on other networks, and some Democrats say, oh, it would send the wrong message if we actually live by the belief that no man or woman is above the law.
I can't say it any better than that, Joe. Straight up honest truth here is that every single person, no matter your political party, no matter who you are, should be saying, look, we should be very concerned when someone with the amount of power and wealth breaks our laws and then works to obstruct the breaking of our laws. Because even in that Mar-a-Lago case, that's the pattern with Donald Trump. And a lot of these investigations really include the behavior that's also that I'm going to do the crime and bury it. So that I can continue to get away with it, and then use our own democratic processes against our democracy. Because the rule of law here, both in the case of an Alvin Bragg, who now we have Republicans in Congress talking about hauling him in. There's no power or control in a democratic process for federal lawmakers to go after a locally elected official doing his job, which is to go after anyone they believe has committed a crime. And remember, this is a grand jury, right? I mean, we have a process of due process, and Donald Trump is getting it right now.
So, Maya, let's just talk procedurally here and use your good lawyer's brain about what happens from here. As Michael reported, there may be a new witness today, which would mean maybe there's not a vote on a potential indictment anyway until sometime next week. If the former president is indicted, and that's still an open question, what happens from here? Do you suspect we'll see him downtown in Manhattan being walked into the courthouse, or how does this look?
Well, look, I mean, I think, as was stated earlier, we have never known when or an indictment would come down, whether, but although we suspect it will, and then what that indictment will be for. I'm not surprised to hear that there may be another witness. Let me just say that, because anytime you have the witness that we saw in Mr. Costello, of course they have to consider whether to provide more evidence to a grand jury. I do think you will see some attention to avoiding an appearance that Donald Trump is being somehow undermined as a candidate. I think rightly there will be some sensitivity to that, but I think there's also going to be a balance there. So Donald Trump will have the opportunity probably to present himself. And there may be an organized arrangement about how that happens to preserve some dignity and decorum at the same time that he's held accountable.
So Michael Bender wanted to provide you with some color. Just down the street from the Manhattan courthouse where the Trump proceedings are going on is the film set for the upcoming Joker sequel. And they're filming this weekend a scene that's going to have 700 people, explosions, and Lady Gaga. So I think that feels appropriate for the spectacle we're seeing there. But that's not where Donald Trump's going to be this weekend. He's going to be in Waco, Texas, his first major rally of this campaign. Give us a sense as to what you expect to hear from him in a location that has raised a lot of eyebrows.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we have a sense of what we will see from Trump and hear from his crowd. I mean, this is you just look at where we're at right now in the week with Donald Trump. I mean, he's gone on the social media and said announced he's going to be arrested without any information. Again, making crude sexual jokes about Ron DeSantis, calling him the Manhattan DA a woke tyrant. And that's even before he gets to the rally stage where he's often at his most politically reckless. The other interesting thing here, I think, heading into Waco, I mean, he's going back into the crowd here, right? I mean, Trump thrives around his people. He is, we're talking about this indictment. Possible indictment. He's facing the front runner of the Republican Party, is facing 4 criminal investigations right now. And how are both things true? We'll see that in Waco. His supporters who come out for him time and time again, year after year, these are the folks who are keeping him in the race at the end, and his grip tight around the Republican Party.
All right, Michael C. Bender of the New York Times and legal analyst Maya Wiley, thank you both very much for being on this morning.